organic intellectual, which is not someone raised on a farm with hormones or pesticides, but rather a person who spreads the myth of the wonders of the revolution. Option 2. Option 2, to disagree but remain silent. Option 3, to disagree and face the consequences, which range from losing your job, losing your much-loved free health care and free education for your children, or spending your life locked up behind bars. Option 4, to go into exile. And option 5, auto-inflicted death is the most radical of the solution, of course. On a side note, the percentage of suicide in Cuba have gone through the roof under the revolution. From 1969 to 82, went from 8 to 23.2 deaths for every 100,000 people. The rate continues to go over for each, to be over 20 for each 100,000. This and other horrifying facts can be found in Suicide in Cuba and Miami, where the rates of Cuban on both sides of the Florida Straits are compared. If you guess that when we reach the U.S., fewer Cubans commit suicide, then you're dead on. But how did I go from literature to suicide? Oh yes, by something about Cuba. But again, we're here to discuss poetry, so let's cheer up. And all that occurs to me now is, be careful. Poetry can seriously jeopardize your health.
Thank you, Alexis. Yeah, like porcelain becomes like a present in Marcelo's poetry. Then now my spirit goes into Alexis' anecdotes, and that's, I guess, the beginning of immortality. But I want to thank Paulo Valo for inviting me here, inviting us here, and the Poetry and Poetics department, I think it is, or center, and Timothy Steele for inviting us poets here and to talk about so many things. After poetry, I didn't write anything because normally I don't write anything because I think the essence for me of poetry is just chant. The central problem of my poetry is precisely something that both poets have touched upon tonight, which is the appearance of the current of chant in the creation of poetry. But this is not the theme that I want to talk about tonight. But the fact that some of us decide or choose to create or to instill form into our writing at a certain point in our life, or I know in the case of the three of us here, Marcelo has been writing sonnets and also translating Shakespeare sonnets in different Spanish meters. And Alexis, of course, is an accomplished sonnet writer. And I want to basically talk about my experience and what happened through which encounters I started to write for the first time, following some of these meters and very precise forms, but are so different from a free-flowing poem, which is what most people write. Anybody can just sit down and write freely a poem. Chances are that most of the time the poems are going to be bad. But also, if you learn the meters and you learn the formal aspects of poetry and you sit down and also write that poetry. Meaning that formal poetry has no advantage over blank verse or free-form poetry. It's just that it adds an element of chance for me. So this is what started to intrigue me about poetry. This is, I don't know if this is, or Luis Borges, the famous and great Argentinian poet, who said the term, invented this term, or this is something that came from before, but I read it in Borges that a sonnet is a thinking machine. Máquina de pensar, a thinking machine. Meaning the sonnet in itself provides the completion of a thought, and this was true for me. This is why I became fascinated by the magic of sonnet writing. And I can remember distinctly when this happened. It happened when I came in contact with the poetry of one of my compatriots, my fellow human writer, Severo San Luis. I don't know if you've read Severo in your classes. He's a novelist, but also a poet. And he wrote this wonderful pornographic poem in the 1980s, which were like really lascivious and poems. And I was fascinated by the way in which such a wide range of sexual acts could be instilled into such a strict form, which in Spanish we identify, especially with the Baroque period, especially with the great sonnet writer Quevedo, and then with, of course, with Góngora, with very obscure, or maybe really convoluted and complicated, and a higher degree of complication, but then again, absolutely beautiful poetry. I have read these poets and I had a reverence for, of course, for this, what we call the golden age of Spanish poetry. And I knew Quevedo and I knew Góngora, but about it, I didn't have, I didn't think much of the form itself. But at that point, when I read Quevedo, then I decided that living in exile, and then I talked to the church, the reign that Alex was talking about. During an exile, and in the place was so strange and completely alien to me, that was the city of Miami. The sonnet could fulfill the same purpose, the same function that it had for the rest of it. So I started writing about street life at the time. This is the kind of life that I was leading. It was like living in the low end of society, in the life of downtown in a big city in America. So I started writing the life and the observations about this life in downtown Miami in the 80s. And at the beginning of the 90s, I had enough of these observations accumulated to write a book and try to convey these ideas about city life in a very practical form. Then I went to one of the cheesiest Cuban poets ever existed, very famous in Latin America. His name is José Ángel Poeta. Anyone here familiar with Poeta? Yes? Okay. So Poeta, for some of us, is a fantastic poet. It's a popular poet, and everybody would identify with his theme. So I went to Poeta because of all poets in Latin America, he was the one who had written a book about poetic forms, prosody, they call it. So I went to Poeta and read his tratado, his treatise on prosody, and I started to work out the inner, to understand the inner working of a sonnet. It was a great sonnet, right? And then I tried my hand at